What's the theme of the week, Robin?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Laura. The theme of the week today is the weather in October. As we're celebrating the first week of spring right now this September, we thought we'd, kind of jump ahead and help Sherry and all the other people that are going to be traveling in New Zealand in October. October is an awesome time to visit New Zealand, and it is considered one of the shoulder season, meaning that there are fewer people visiting New Zealand and therefore the country will feel a little less crowded. Not that New Zealand ever really feels crowded, let's be honest. But that also means that some activities, some transport options and even maybe some accommodations can be a little cheaper than in the midst of the summer season. What's more, October is mid-spring in New Zealand, so you may be able to experience some mild, comfortable weather. So today we're going to go over some tips for traveling in New Zealand in October. We're going to go over all the different weather patterns that you can expect, and we'll wrap up with a bit of a packing list for your trip to New Zealand in October. So let's get started. Let's begin with 5 tips for visiting New Zealand in October, and to do that we're going to go to the beautiful Laura.
Okay, let's start with our first tip for traveling in October is to make sure that your day pack always has at least a rain jacket and one extra warm layer available, because during that mid-spring season the weather is ever changeable and you'll be pretty glad to have just those backups available when you're out and about. Next up, be aware that some walks may be closed because October is still during the lambing season in New Zealand. For instance, one of the most popular walks that does get closed occasionally for the lambing season is the Roy's Peak walk in Wanaka. So yeah, make sure that you just double check on the Department of Conservation website for on that specific walk page. They'll have a little red alert at the top saying whether or not the walk is open, so just double check that before you go on any of your walks to make sure it is open. And speaking of the lambing season, if you are in New Zealand on a work visa, like a working holiday visa, and you're looking for some really cool experience, but also some accommodation and food in exchange for doing some work, then look out for woofing opportunities during October. Usually farms need a lot of help during the lambing season, and this is the perfect opportunity to do some woofing. Next tip is to make sure to slap on some sunscreen. So yes, even on cloudy days in October, if you are out all day, you most definitely will get sunburned. It's just the UV rays are extra harsh here in New Zealand. So yeah, make sure that you do have sunscreen if you are out all day, especially if it is a sunny day, then you are going out even for just a short while. Very good idea to have some high factor sunscreen on. And then finally, October is the shoulder season in New Zealand. So it means that you don't have to book everything way in advance, not like in summer. But yeah, you can travel a little bit more spontaneously. However, this rule doesn't really apply for really small tourist hubs, like for instance Milford Sound. If you want to stay in Milford Sound, there's only one proper accommodation there. Same for Lake Tekapo. It's a very small town, but everybody wants to go there, so usually accommodation's booked out all year. So yeah, make sure that for those small areas, do your bookings ahead. Elsewhere, you don't need to worry too much.
Here you go. Next up, we will be talking about the average temperatures in New Zealand. Alright, so let's talk about the typical temperature in New Zealand in October. Alright, so let's begin with northern New Zealand, which encompasses Northland, Auckland and Tauranga, where you can expect around 14 degrees Celsius, which is about 57 degrees Fahrenheit. In central North Island, we have Hamilton, Taupo and Rotorua. Those are the 3 places, like the main populated area there. The average temperature during the day will be around 13 degrees Celsius, which is around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. In southwest North Island, we have New Plymouth, Palmerston North and Wellington, with an average average temperature during the daylight of 12 degrees Celsius, which is around 53 degrees Fahrenheit. In eastern North Island, we have Gisborne, Napier, and the Wairarapa region, where you can get some great wines. And that is an average of 14 degrees Celsius, which is around 57 degrees Fahrenheit. In the South Island now, we're taking the ferry to go to Blenheim and Nelson, which is northern South Island. We have an average of 13 degrees Celsius, which is around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. If we head to the wild west coast with Westport, Hokitika and Milford Sound, we have an average of 11 degrees Celsius, which is around 51 degrees Fahrenheit. In the eastern South Island with Kaikoura, Christchurch and Timaru, we have an average of 12 degrees Celsius, which is about 53 degrees Fahrenheit. In the inland South Island, we have Lake Tekapo, Queenstown and Alexandra, which average around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius, which is 48 to 51 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, wrapping up with the southern New Zealand with Dunedin and Invercargill, we have an average of 11 degrees Celsius, which is about 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Next up, we'll talk about rainfalls. Okay, let's talk about the other weather pattern in October, and let's talk about rainfalls. Okay, so rainfall in October are quite frequent. Again, we are in spring and, you know, the New Zealand weather tends to be ever changeable. And October, especially when we're in this kind of season, it will rain on and off quite a lot. But if we are to look at the average rainfall that we're going to get region by region, here is what you can expect in October. So in northern New Zealand, which is Northland, Auckland and Tauranga, you can expect 120 millimeters of rain, which is about 5 inches. In central North Island, which is Hamilton, Taupo and Rotorua, you can expect around 80 millimeters of rain, which is about 3 inches. In the southwest North Island, which is New Plymouth, Palmerston North and Wellington, you can expect 100 millimeters of rain, which is about 4 inches. If you hate the rain, you can head to the eastern North Island with Ginborough, Napier and Wairarapa, which only going to get about 60 millimeters of rain, which is about 2.4 inches. This is the driest place in October on the North Island. And that's it. Then head to the South Island. That's it. I'm done with the North Island. What am I doing? We're going to northern South Islands with Blenheim and Nelson, 90 millimeters of rain, which is about 3.5 inches. In the western South Island, again, always the wettest part, west coast, so that's Westport, Hokitika and Milford Sound, between 300 millimeters and 700 millimeters of rain, which is 12 to 27.5 inches. Yes, that's right. I got the numbers correct right here. It is lots of rain. In eastern South Island, we have Kaikoura, Christchurch and Timaru, which is about 50 millimeters of rain, 2 inches of rain. This is the lowest amount of rain in the entire country, whoop whoop, in October. Inland South Island, we have Lake Tekapo, Queenstown and Alexandra. You can expect 40 millimeters to 60 millimeters, sorry, 1.5 to 2.4. No, 1.5 to 2.4 compared to 2 inches. That's not lower.
Oh, it's 40
It's 4260. 4260.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
No, it's not. Yeah. And then southern New Zealand, we have Dunedin and Invercargill with 70 millimeters, which is 2.7 inches. Here you go, that's all you need to know about the rain. Next up, we'll talk about the best places to visit in October. Nope. Yes.
Sorry for heckling you from the background. That's lower!
But that wasn't. So let's continue with our coverage of the weather in New Zealand in October with, you know, some more travel tips. And what we thought we'd do is that we talk about some of the best places that there are to visit in New Zealand in October, starting with Laura.
Yeah, so a great place to visit during October, which is in the middle of spring in New Zealand, is Christchurch. So Christchurch is known as the Garden City of New Zealand, and there's many stunning gardens that you can visit. There is, of course, the beautiful Hagley Park with the Botanic Gardens attached to it. And yeah, going through the gardens during spring while many flowers are in bloom is the perfect time to visit.
Another great place to visit is also on the South Island, actually south of the South Island, and it's Stewart Island. So October is the middle of spring, and that's when all the birds are trying to find mate and do the nasties. And that's for, to us humans, we just see enchanting, beautiful bird songs, and we just love it. So yeah, the bird life is completely like changed and becoming super alive at that time of the year. So visiting places like beautiful Stewart Island and the nearby Ulva Island, which is a bird sanctuary, can be absolutely enchanting.
Okay, next up we have Hamilton. also for garden reasons. I seem to be the one talking about gardens all of a sudden. But yeah, Hamilton is home to the famous Hamilton Gardens, which is a beautiful free attraction to visit. And of course, one of the best times to visit is during the blossoming spring months.
Alright, so a really good place to visit in October in New Zealand is the Tongariro National Park, mostly famous for the Tongariro Crossing. So you guys know the Tongariro Crossing. If you're planning a trip to New Zealand, there is kind of no way you don't know it. And yeah, October is a great time to tackle it because it is before the really busy tourist season and it is just after the snow melts and making it safe to hike alone. So doing this icon of New Zealand without the crowd is possible in October, and we highly recommend it.
And finally, the Fiordland National Park is a great time to visit in October. It's just before that busy tourist season kicks in, which usually tends to be right at the end of October when all the hiking trails start to get busier and all that. So if you fit in some good hikes, even multi-day hikes, just before the end of October, you're likely to experience sort of the best of both worlds, where you get some more decent weather than in winter, but also just beating the crowds before the trails get busy.
Alright, next up we'll talk about a packing list for October. But before that, let's get back to the live chat. Here are a few extra things that you need to pack specifically if you are visiting New Zealand in October with Laura.
With me. Okay. Yeah, so your packing list for October, and pretty much any season in New Zealand. But let's start off with mid-layers. So in order to, you know, have that extra layer to put on if you are feeling the chill, or on the other hand, take it off when it is a little bit warmer, which can definitely happen in October. Make sure that you do pack at least a couple of mid-layers. I'm talking more like, you know, an extra jumper or like a hoodie or something that can go over the top of, you know, your t-shirts, or even if you are wearing like thin thermals underneath, just something to put on top for extra warmth or to take off with ease. Next up, we have a rain jacket. So this is something you definitely need. Again, in October or any time of the year. It can rain at any time in New Zealand, often with little warning. So yeah, having a good rain jacket, not just one of those cheap scrunch-up rain jackets, like an actual proper rain jacket, is definitely highly recommended in New Zealand. Also to do with the rain, make sure that you have some waterproof hiking shoes or hiking boots, whatever your preference is. Not only is there a lot of walks in New Zealand, and we're not just talking about the long day, multi-day hiking. You don't have to worry about, you know, doing all that if you don't want to, but there's also many of the sites and attractions are down at least short walking trails. So having shoes that are comfortable to wear all day when you're out and about and to do some walks is definitely a must, and coupling that with waterproof hiking shoes is ideal, especially when it starts raining. You don't want your shoes to be soaked through because that will take your whole trip to probably dry. Next up, make sure you have some swimwear. So there's lots of opportunities to, you know, get in the water in New Zealand. Although in October it's probably still a little too cold to go swimming at the beach. New Zealand luckily has a few hot pools, has some really cool water adventure activities like whitewater rafting or caving, that sort of thing. So there's usually opportunity to wear some sort of swimwear at some point. You'll also want to make sure you have high factor sunscreen, because although it may seem like it's going to rain all the time, the way that we talk about how you need to pack all this rain gear, there is actually some sun that occurs in New Zealand quite often as well. So high factor sunscreen, the UV levels in New Zealand are quite high. So even in October, and even if you don't usually wear sunscreen, it's a good idea to have some, especially in New Zealand. And then finally, a day pack. So usually when because we've talked about all this interchangeable weather, we've talked about, you know, having sunscreen, all that sort of stuff. Well, that's not going to be helpful if you leave it back at your accommodation or in your car. Having a day pack is absolutely essential for, you know, having all these essential supplies when you are out and about exploring, going on some short walks, going to some different sites. So yeah, make sure you have a day pack. It's usually a good idea to get one that you can also, you know, use as your carry-on for coming into New Zealand, so that you don't overpack as well. And yeah, that's about it.
Here you go. So that concludes everything you need to know about traveling in New Zealand in October. We've got much more tips on nzpocketguide.com, so check it out and hit the like and subscribe button because YouTube asked me to tell you that.